Hey, this is Hans from Request for Music, and this time I'm going to be talking about the Yule, RFM Yule, which is the latest module that I've created. And Yule in Swedish stands for wheel, and in Old Norse or Nordic or whatever you call it, it stood for something like movement or motion or whatever. And the Yule is part of my runic series, so that means that it looks a bit different from the other ones. And in this case, I put some background in it. This is the module as it is at the moment, and I'll put it a bit more to the center of this. And as soon as I connect it, you will hear that it gives some kind of motion sound, because you see a couple of parts in the interface. You obviously have an input, because this is normal pitch input. It doesn't mention that, but this is the pitch input. This is the gate input. So that means that you can just play it like a keyboard if you wanted to, but it will give you sound anyway, because actually you have the option of switching on or off the envelope, which is on the bottom end here. But so first of all, let's just connect it, hook it up. So as soon as I connect it to my my sound outputs, I get a lot of sound, as you can hear. I'll dial this back a bit, so hopefully my voice is a bit stronger than the original sound of the Yule. So I've got a sine wave, and it got a lot of motion here, or it got some motion there, and I got a lot of knobs and stuff in there that hopefully help in creating the sound, and hope the interface is understandable enough for what it does. So underneath, let me first dial back this a bit before while going into this. Underneath the input and gate input, I have this panel here on the left, and the panel says that there's a mix knob, and for the rest there's an op1 and an op2. Actually, it uses sort of a FM modulation or AM modulation, actually, with which you can create your sounds. So to that end, I have on the op1, I have a ratio, I have an FM level, a carrier feedback, modulation feedback, and an AM level. Those are the top 5 ones. And then I've got a fold minus and a fold max. And maybe it's a good idea to enter or to put a scope on there as well. So I think that I should be able to find that easily. Hang on one sec. Oh, it's not only giving me that one. Let's take Weevil's multi-oscilloscope, so I'll have to put it over a bit to have that in sight. So okay, so if I hook this up, so I'll also take my output from my left channel into the scope, you'll see that there's some output. Let's dial this up so I can leave the original a bit softer. There is already a lot of movement going on there, and that's actually done by these gray knobs here on the bottom, because those gray knobs are for the galactic airwave port from Arware, which I've got built in. So I should actually dial this back to 0 to wet, and then you see the original sine wave that is going on. Let's dial it back a bit. So I see a sine wave, and the sine wave is coming from both operator 1 and 2. This one is actually the dial. The mix is the dial between operator 1 and 2. And if I have it in this setup, I can actually, and I'll select the other one and add, hook that up with the second. So you can see that if I go through this, I get either my left output, which is hooked on to operator 1, or my second output, which is operator 2. And so this one actually mixes it still over those two outputs, unless I switch on this button where you have both of them mixed in, and then this sort of is used as sort of a blend between those operator 1 and 2. So you get a monaural signal that is going into the filter and all the other stuff that is available in Yule. So let me first of all switch this off, because most of the time I use the airwave reverb to thicken everything. So if I dial up my wet, you see that a lot of stuff is already happening in the sound. And if I just dial it up a bit, you'll hear that as well. Okay, so what is the nice part of the module then? Well, I have these operators, and let's first of all, I'll set it at mono so I can go onto operator 1, and it's still going through both channels because the airwave module is a stereo module, so I still have different sounds on both channels. But I have the operator ratio, where the ratio is actually sort of the pitch, but the pitch ratio between or in an FM based module, then you have a carrier and you have a modulator. So that means that the modulator can actually be used by using FM levels. So that means that if I dial this up, it's going to be frequency modulating the signal, and it's bringing in the value of that modulator there. So that means that I can have a different sort of sound. If I dial that back and I go into the next dial, which says carrier feedback, I'm going to take the output of the original operator of the carrier and dial that back into the system, so that also modulates and gives you a different kind of modulation there, because it doesn't take the modulator into account. So if I change this up, I now have both carrier and normal modulator FM. But if I now change the ratio, the modulator stays in a different part than or a different frequency than the actual carrier, so I get different sounds altogether. So it means that even if you don't use any of the other functionality within the module, you can still change your sounds that way. So let me dial that back again and reset that to 0. I also have modulator feedback. Well, the modulator feedback obviously only works if the modulator effect can be heard in the sound by using the FM level. So if I dial this up a bit, where you can see what kind of sounds it makes, I can use the modulator feedback to give more high frequencies and stuff like that, because it changes the waveform. And the last option is to not use FM, but use the modulator for AM modulation, which looks a bit different, sounds a bit different, so there's a way of working with that as well. And the last two that are in there are the sort of a fold kind of way. So that means that it's folding the either the minus the lowest part back into itself. You see that the bottom edge changes; it sort of folds back in itself, and you can also do that with the higher part, which is actually flipping it straight away. So if you dial that back a bit, you can also add or change the frequency spectrum of this waveform. And since we have two of those, I can actually go around and use that one as well. So the other one is still at the base level or something, but if I dial this up and just change the frequency level for that and maybe switch it to both channels separately, you'll hear that you get much more of a maybe useful, hopefully useful sound that way. And if I then dial up my level for the airwave part, the galactic reverb, then you can hear that of course there's a lot more going on in the sound, something like this. So, well, obviously this is nice and all, and apart from this, I have a transpose knob here on the white part that can easily transpose the full signal and operator 2 detune, so I can just slightly detune it to get a feather effect. And apart from that, I've got two filters for each of those operators. One filter with a cutoff and a resonance for operator 1, and F2, which is the filter for operator 2 with a cutoff and a resonance. So those are all those kind of things. And obviously there needs to be an overall level, which was what I was already using for this. Then apart from that, now the sound is not being changed by an envelope, so that means that if I switch on the envelope, which is here, it will now close down, or it will shut down as a sound, because it needs a gate obviously to be able to use that. So if I move this back a bit, hang on, I'll have to change this a bit, so I'll still see the scope then, like that. Well, close enough. That means that obviously I need to hook up my pitch and hook up my gate to this, and I also need to switch on my keyboard, otherwise it won't do anything. But now if I have that connected and it recognizes my keyboard, which I need to take care of apparently, so hang on 1 second, need to switch that on. Where are you? Right, so now it should be available. So now, well, obviously I need to dial this back a bit. So now it's a very short, simple ADSR, and obviously I can change that. So if I dial this up a bit and change back my get sounds like this, so you can hear that you can still use it as whatever, or kind of normal sound that you would like as a lead or a bass or whatever. Apart from that, if I click on any of those knobs in there, you see that there's this thing changing on the top, where you actually see the name of the variable that is changed, or the knob that is changed. So if I click on my ratio for operator 1, it will tell you operator 1 ratio, and it will give you the circle on these top line of things. Those are all LEDs or lights or whatever. And those lights turns on if you set the settings for that specific knob. So if I select my ratio, it knows now that it has to deal with the ratio. And on the right side I see a couple of knobs that I haven't discussed so far, and those are my X speed, Y speed, X move, Y move, the size, and the influence. What does that mean? Well, since the operator 1 ratio is selected, I can now dial up my size, and it means that you get a circle, and that circle can be moved over by this red dot. The red dot is actually sort of graphic display of where the oscillator is, or what the oscillator does. And obviously that in itself does give sound as soon as you do something, but it is actually the how do I say that, the amount of how much this red dot goes over the other circle, what that does the trick. Because what this actually is sort of a modulation circle, where in the center, in the dead center of this circle, it would be maximum modulation by whatever influence you give it. On the outside of on the border of this circle, it will be nil. It will be null. It will be no modulation, whatever. So for instance, if I would change this and let me switch off the envelope, so we have it all the time, and maybe I also take the pitch out, and I'll just set back some values so we get a normal sine wave to start off with. I think that's a lot easier to work with. I'll go the other way. So I've got a sine wave again, and it's moving, and I'm using both of them, and it's going through this and giving you this sort of wobbly moving sound. But now I've got this circle, and I've got it selected for whatever knob I select. So you see that every time I click on any knob, it will change to whatever is selected there. And it doesn't even do it only there, but it also does it for those values. It doesn't do it for the ADSR, but for the rest, most of those knobs do have a setting here on the right side. So going back to my ratio again, if I select this and I have changed the size, as you can see. And now as soon as this overlaps, it will listen to the influence. So if I dial my influence up, you will hear that the sound actually changes. Pitch goes up. I don't know how audible it is, but you can hear that this is affected by the influence. And that goes from 0 in the middle to whatever height on the left, on the right. So it goes up to 5 and it goes to -5 the other way around. So that means that you can actually change the pitch up or down. This is for the ratio. But now instead of this, so let's actually, and hopefully you've seen that, and I can actually even click on any LED here on top to just select whatever, so that also selects the actual knob that goes with it. But if I select anything else, you see that I have a purple LED now. So if I click this one again, or the ratio, then I can turn my size back and you will see that it goes off. So that way you have hopefully enough feedback to show you which of those sources are used for your sound. Yeah. So if I do this, and let's take the FM level for instance. So I click on that one, I'll dial the size up, so I get this circle there, and I dial up my influence. That would mean that if the red ball goes over that, it will actually change the sound. And two ways. Obviously I can change the movement of this size, of this circle, because I can actually just go about and let's say for instance I'm going to change the Y speed. It doesn't do anything yet because it also does need a movement. So if I do something like this, it will actually go there, and as soon as this red ball comes over, then it will influence the modulation. So I need to have a larger movement to make that happen. And then you hear that as soon as the red ball goes over, it will do some kind of modulation there. And the deeper this goes, the more effect it has. And as soon as I change the size of that circle, the chance that it overlaps becomes larger as well. So it will change that sound more often. Apart from that, I can actually change the movement of this red ball. The next, or the most left LED here on the top, says oscillator. So with that, I can actually change this. So if I change, for instance, the X and Y movement of this, it will make a different kind of movement over your screen so that it will modulate more often. And then if I take, for instance, the carrier feedback, so I select the knob first, or I select it here or whatever, I can actually now change the size of that. So something like this, and I'll change the influence as well. Now it has two modulation things that I can change, and obviously you can change the X speed and the X move for this. So I get these kinds of modulations. Now it's waiting for the one, and as soon as they both work, it'll double that that functionality is sort of. So, and obviously I can do that for the other one as well. So if I select my second, first of all, let's dial just the frequency modulation up for the second one, and obviously I see that back here. But let's say I'm going to do the ratio of operator 2. So I click it and I see that it is selected. I dial up my size and I dial up my influence. It will now change that frequency of that second oscillator. So some kind of drone sound, if you want it like that, is easily made. And yeah, you could go as far as creating circles for all of those if you wanted to. And indeed, since there's also settings for the dry and wet settings, you can also arrange that. So that would mean that if I hire this, it will have a higher level of this reverb than when it's going out. So if I have this changing in X and Y movement as well, so let's do something like this. And if I change both X speed and Y speed, it will make some circular or elliptical or whatever movement over the screen. And again, as soon as it overlaps, it will affect that. So yeah, that's basically what it is about. And obviously, if I connect my pitch again, I could still play this. It might be very strange sounds that you get, but it's still playable. And I can dial my glide up. And then if I use my my envelope, where the envelope actually is before my reverb, so then if I dial something up like this short attack and decay and some release, and let's take the sustain up, and maybe dial back the ratio change. So if I select my ratio here, I can actually just turn back my influence, so it won't go that far in frequency. Yeah, so you hear that's what it basically is. And actually here on the top there are a couple of buttons, so it means that if I select any of these, I could actually hear the effect by clicking it on solo, which is top button here. So that means that now the effect I get is only the effect of this operator 2 ratio. So the other ones are not affected. But I can actually click on another one like this and switch that to solo, so that will also be affected when it goes over that, or it is indeed modulated. And if I want to get rid of that, the knob left to that will reset all of those solo settings, so you get back to the original. And hopefully you've also seen that when I click it on solo, actually the LED changes to a yellow color instead of the purple color, to show you a bit better of what is going on. So yeah, that's basically what Yule is about. Apart from that, there are a couple of screens because it has outputs, and the outputs send out the modulation levels. So if I reset my solo again, it would reset, or it would output control voltages for all of this. So if I dial this into here, you would see normally a control voltage as soon as there's a level going out, and it depends on the height of the signals, etc. The signal is not too high, but obviously you can change that afterwards. You see that it's also very slow. You see it moving, but I would actually have to use the very slow scope. I do have that, but I don't know the name again. It must be something with slow, and I don't know from who it is. Slow scope, yeah, there it is. So if I hook this up, and that takes a lot of time, I'm afraid. But if I hook that up, then you will see that the signals would be still visible. It really takes a lot of time, but I'm on a pretty old machine here, so it might be that it will not be visible all of the way, because it's breaking that up here on the screen. But otherwise, I would just connect this, hook this up to the proper output, and it will take some time. But then afterwards, you will see that modulation in there, depending on range and speed and whatever. So let's see, how was that again? But apart from if it's showed or not, which it really does, but actually there's 4 outputs. Number 4 gives you all of those levels from all of those modulators, or all of those sources. On the other hand, number 1 gives you whatever you switch on in panel number 1. Panel 1, you just click on it by clicking on this, and it will show you that panel. And in that panel, you have all of the modulators that are available at the moment. So you've seen that I had this operator 1 FM level, that's the one here, and the carrier 1 feedback, and the operator 2 ratio, so that's that one, and the last one is the reverb wet signal. So all of those are available, and it's up to you to click whatever you want as an output in that operator 1. Or in that jack 1, and you've got the same kind of thing in the next one, in 2 and 3, so you can decide which of those signals you want as a modulation source for whatever, based on what is going on in you. So yeah, that's basically, I think, what the module is about. And especially when used as a drone, you can get very interesting sounds when you combine that. I'm not quite sure if I have any in there at the moment, but let's see. Well, as you can hear, this was sound that I called something like ambient lead or whatever. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and you see a very yeah, irritating fast running couple of modulators. But here you can get normal standard leads out of this. So let's take some other thing. I have no idea really, because I've made these couple of things over the time that I've been working on this. Something like that. And let's see if I have something more. Module presets. I have changed some parts since I created this, so it's quite possible that they don't even work as they're supposed to. But so you have an option to create usable lead sounds, or you can just use it as just a drone source. Just take out all of the pitch information and the gate information and let this off. And you get whatever you've set this to. And in this case, it doesn't even use any modulations, source, but most of it comes from modulator, feedback, AM setting, carrier feedback, FM setting. Also this fold stuff that I told you about is also in there. So again, it's just a matter of playing around. It's partly usable as a normal synthesizer, but otherwise, especially for the more experimental inclined people, I think this can be nice to work with. So I hope that was interesting to you. Obviously, there's a 5-day demo. The module will be cheaper for the first part, while in the intro period, which goes until the 23rd of June of this year, 2023. So yeah, I hope you're interested. And otherwise, just play around with it, see what it can do for you, and see you back in the next one. Cheers.